Hello, hiya, vanakkam, assalamu alaikum, namaskar, hi, hello everybody. So today we'll be going through something called tapping. To know more about it, I will leave a link in the description. You can go through it. It includes a free ebook as well, coming from the original source of tapping. I'll briefly explain the procedure, very basic, very simple to do, and very effective. And we will focus on COVID right now, something very overarching, which is during this COVID pandemic time, globally, generally speaking, most people are experiencing fear and isolation. Of course, isolation is now enforced in most countries. We are supposed to keep arm's length distance with everybody. And a lot of people are not going to work. Either they have lost their jobs or they are working from home. So we are feeling socially isolated. And it is affecting our bodies, our emotions, and our minds. Um, Whether or not we are COVID positive, we are going through this pandemic and how we are experiencing together as humanity, which is both feeling fear and feeling isolation, more or less, and at different times. So you can use this tapping, EFT tapping process for anything in your life, but we're going to focus as an example and as a practice for just COVID and dealing with fear and isolation as a result of COVID, or as a result of this pandemic, or caused by COVID, or caused by pandemic that we're experiencing as humanity, including the way I am experiencing it as an individual. So it's a tapping, very simple, and there are 9 points, and there is a sentence that you say, and those 9 points are meridian points, were the energy points that the whole process have come up with, and it works. And for the COVID, the sentence we have constructed is, even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept of myself. So I have inserted the word lovingly that is coming from Louise Hay, which she talks about essentially, I love me. Phyllis Crystal also talks about that at the end of the Maypole, I love me. And, and in a nutshell, that is what Anita Murjani in her near-death experience um, book titled Dying to Be Me, that is essentially the message that she was giving when she came back from her near-death experience after the doctors told her that she's got she's got to go because she had the stage 4 cancer. And basically she returned back, and of course not only she lived, not only her um, cancer disappeared, and she was in perfect health, and she was traveling around the world being an inspirational speaker alongside um, people that she looked up to. So she lived the life that we can also aspire to live, and live it. And the nutshell of that was, I love me. I love me is the single most uh, healing mantra we can have, whether it is a physical ailment or mental or emotional ailments. We can deal with traumas. So just this, I love me, and hugging yourself, say, I love me. I love me just the way I am. I love me despite of my problems. So I've inserted that word into it. So the sentence we're going to say, which is, we are acknowledging the sentence, we're accepting the sentence, and we're accepting ourselves, and we are tapping those 9 important meridian points, which essentially does something to our nervous system and so forth, or our emotional sympathetic system, releasing the hormones that our body does, so that it doesn't feel the fear. It's essentially that. And all you have to do is try it and experience it for yourself. So the sentence is, even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Okay, the procedure is tapping. The first is the karate chops. Okay, I'm just show you the points. Yeah, so using the tips of your fingers, you're using the tips of your fingers, and how hard you are tapping, medium, not very light and not very hard, just tapping so you can feel the pressure, right? That's the first point. There are 9 points. The second is the inside of your eyes. So here you can use one fingers or two fingers, yeah, which is uh, the above your eye. It's above your eye and where your eyebrows start, sort of like that. It's on the bone. It's on the bone that surrounds the eye socket, right? So tapping there. I'm just showing you the points right now. And then the outside of your eye again, that bone, that edge of that bone surrounding your eyeball. You're tapping there. And then I'm going to take my eyeglasses off and tapping under the eye again, that bulging bone surrounding your eyeball, right? And then we go under the nose. One or two fingers, choose whatever fingers you want. Under the nose, and essentially if you look at the marma point, it is the point where the gums meet your teeth. It's that point. It's a marma point. You can tap on that, and then there's under the chin, right there, under the lower lip, whatever you want to call it. So there also I essentially use the marma point, which is the lower jawline and your gum line meet. Now tapping there. So you have your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you have 3 more left, which is not on your face. And one is sort of like right the collarbone, right there. It's at the collarbone. It's actually slightly below that collarbone. It's that marma point right there. So you can use the hands like that, or you can use the hands. It's easier if you cross your hands and tap like that. Yeah. Again, you can use all the 4 fingers. You can use 3 fingers, whatever worked for you. So that's 7. And the 8th point is, so you have your underarm, your armpit, right? So it's like a handful below the armpit, about 4 inches. It's that point. So you can tap your left and right separately, or you can do it together. So for the instructional purposes, because everybody has a different body structure and comfort, I'm going to do it one at a time. When you are practicing on your own, you can decide to do it 2 together, or you can do 1 at a time, right? Right? The final one is on top of the head. So that point is on the skull, but if you look at in the front, you don't know where people are going on top of the skull. Is it behind, top, or the front? So the best way to do is right in the middle, which is in line with your ears. So if you go up from your ears, the point when you lift, that's the top of your head. So how are you tapping it? Both hands with these 4 fingers. You're tapping not with your hands, but with your fingers. Everywhere the tapping is with your fingertips. Tapping with your fingertips. Yeah? So those are the 9 points. And the sentence we know is that even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. And like in everything, like in every affirmation or mantra, it is always go beyond the words into the meaning and the feeling. And you may not get it the first time, it's fine, but try to see if I can bring a little bit more emotion into it. Yeah. So acknowledging, yeah, I do have fear and I do feel isolated during COVID. I do. Yeah. Even though I have fear, I feel isolated. Yeah, I do. I deeply, not just a little bit on the surface, yeah, I love me. No. I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself unconditionally, right? Not I only accept those parts of myself that I like, and I don't accept those parts of myself which I don't like. And there's an exercise in the Phyllis Crystal method we will discuss in another video about the inner child, because the childhood traumas leave an aspect of our personality like an inner child that doesn't grow at the same pace as the rest of us. And then that causes some sort of outbursts or unwanted reactions in adulthood life. It could be depression, could be outburst anger, could be anything else. But it kind of relates to that. This sentence I have, even though I have fear and I feel isolated and I deeply, lovingly, completely accept myself. It's amazing. Just the affirmation alone is amazing. Now, when that affirmation is set with tapping, it releases some good hormones, some good chemicals in my system, because fear is also a response based on it's a chemical response inside. So we're hacking our system. It's pretty cool, and you'll feel the difference within minutes. And you can do 1 round, you can do 2 rounds, you can do 3 rounds, you can do more rounds. You can do as many rounds as you want. But you have to be true to it. Now, do this exercise if you are essentially feeling that fear and isolation during pandemic, because essentially this everybody to some degree or the other is feeling it. That's why I felt that it'll be good to do it universally, because otherwise the examples that each one of us are going to pull out will be unique to ourselves for tapping. So there we go. So let's start it. All right. So get myself positioned and get myself into the zone of how I'm feeling during pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainty with this pandemic, when this pandemic will go away. How is this affecting the economy? How is it affecting my job, my future, the future of my family, my kids, and health, my health, health of my family, my loved ones, and health of people. There are a lot of people who died during this pandemic, and it has not ended. We don't even know if it has peaked. So there is some level, and we hear news about different variants, and then we hear about vaccines, no vaccines, therapeutics, what are they? So there are a lot of unknown, and that can cause fear. And also we're feeling isolated. So get into the zone. Yeah, start to acknowledge and feel those feelings related to pandemic. What has this face masking and social distancing is done, and restricted travel, and I'm concerned about where I'm going in terms of getting my supplies. Yeah. So this tapping we're doing while being true to ourselves. We don't have to pretend it. We have to get in the zone so I can acknowledge and accept those feelings. That's what the key is. This practice is built around that or on those bases. We don't fake anything. It works because we're essentially getting in tune with our own feelings that we are feeling at this very moment. So we're always being true to ourselves when we're doing this tapping technique. All right, so we'll start with the karate chops. Pick any hand, left or right. I'm going to start with my tapping my left hand on my right hand. You can choose what you like and you switch it. And saying that affirmation or sentence 3 times while I'm tapping it. Even though I have fear and feel isolated during this pandemic, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Switch hands. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Above the eye, even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I feel isolated and feel fear, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Side of the eyes, even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Under the eye. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept of myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Under the nose, 1 or 2 fingers. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. I don't have to fight the pandemic. I don't have to fight the fear. I don't have to justify why I feel. I just acknowledge and accept it under the lower lip. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Just because I feel isolated, just because I feel fear, doesn't mean I don't have to accept myself just the way I am. It's empowering. Even though I fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. 3 points on the rest of the body below the face. First, just that collarbone area, tapping there. Even though I feel isolated and I have fear, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and I feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and I feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and I feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. You can change the words a bit. If you're feeling sad along with it, you can say those words instead of these words. You can say, even though I feel sad and fear, sadness and fear and isolation, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. You can do that. Under the arm, one at a time. Choose whichever side you like. Even though, so it's not the underarm, it's like a handful below that, about 4 inches. Tapping with my fingers, not the tips of my fingers here. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, completely, lovingly accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Final point is above the ear, on top of the head, using the tips of my 4 fingers, tapping on my head 3 times. I have saying the affirmation 3 times. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. Even though I have fear and feel isolated, I deeply, lovingly, and completely accept myself. And at the end of it, just breathe out that fear and isolation from your body. One more breath. Let go of that. Release that. Just with the releasing the carbon dioxide when we breathe out. Just let go of this fear and isolation. As you breathe in that love and acceptance. Okay, come back to the present moment. Have a beautiful rest of the day. You can practice this more than once. You can practice it at multiple times a day. And we'll see you guys soon.